Whether you're a fan of pumpkin patch picking or an avid beachgoer, the inescapable reality is that the Northern Hemisphere is autumn bound, which brings the question, what will your weather be like for this season? Will it be hot, cold, dry, wet? All of these questions and more will be answered in today's video, so without further ado, let's get right into today's forecast. Now, starting off on our first map, we're going to be talking about what we'd like to call the precipitation anomaly forecast. So basically, this is going to tell you whether you're going to have above average precipitation conditions or below average or neutral. So first off, we're going to start in the Pacific Northwest and all across the western United States in that light shade brown. Now that brown means that you're likely expected to have slightly below average conditions. Now I know what you're thinking. We're headed into a La Nina, right? Normally the Pacific Northwest and a lot of the West Coast sees a little bit of above average precipitation, but not so fast. Right now, as of what we're seeing, we're expected to still be within that below average range. And this is because of the current conditions that we've been seeing, okay? So we've had an elevated jet stream kind of headed up over the United States, a lot of the western United States, keeping those areas dry. And I do believe that that high pressure that's building off of the west coast is going to continue to hold and keep things relatively dry. Now, that doesn't mean that the monsoon action that we do expect kind of earlier on in the fall season, that doesn't expect to prohibit that at all. But what that does mean is that much of the western United States will likely see drier conditions, especially along the west coast. We've already kind of seen that with the current anomalies. We actually are in below average conditions right now as of late July 2024, and we are expected to continue that into our fall season. Nothing too extreme though, but for these slightly below average regions, we are expecting some slightly decreased precipitation, nothing too extreme. Now for that darker region there, that means you're going to have drier conditions overall. So we are expecting below average precipitation conditions for those areas. And that's basically kind of showing you that you're really not going to see too much precipitation in that area. You're not going to see too many systems, maybe one or two systems that move off of the Pacific Northwest, a lot of the Pacific coast, if we do see any jet stream lowering where that high pressure kind of collapses and we see some systems are able to move into that area. But I do believe for much of the fall season that we are going to see the systems elevated rather than heading down south more into the areas of Washington, California, and Oregon. Now moving on to those green regions there, we're going to start off in that light green up in the north central United States. So this extends from portions of the Dakotas down over into Michigan and even into some portions of Missouri. That's about as farther south as it goes into northern Missouri. But what we're expected to see here is a bit of a dip in the jet stream. We've been seeing a little bit of the storm track, a pretty consistent one at that throughout the summer, and we are expected to see that continue as we progress into a stronger La Nina. Usually this is pretty typical with La Nina conditions. We see a little bit of a dip in the jet stream, or a trough as you will, and that kind of brings those precipitation patterns further south into those areas, and I do believe that's about as far south as we're going to see the polar jet stream come down this fall. We will maybe see some bigger dips and troughs if we get some big Arctic air masses, but I do believe as for right now, that's about as far extended south as we're going to see that precipitation pattern head there. But we do see another region, an above average region in that dark green. That's where we are expecting elevated conditions of precipitation. We are expecting a heavier storm track and a lot of precipitation to come through that area, pretty persistent. A lot of that Great Lake moisture is also going to accumulate in that area, so I do expect you're going to see a good bit of rainfall and a lot of precipitation conditions this fall season as we progress through the season into La Nina. Now we have a separated region here, and this further south region that has a lot to do with the mid-Atlantic, the southeast, and the northeastern United States. All of those areas are separate from that jet stream. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about for the jet stream. Maybe if we go into the northeast, we start to see that precipitation pattern a part of the polar jet stream. But this area down here is all to do with our tropical systems and a lot of that tropical activity we're expecting this season. We are expecting the potential for a hyperactive hurricane season. Now take that with a grain of salt. We don't want to overuse and spread that word, but we are expected to kind of head into a very busy hurricane season. That's the potential with this season as we head into La Nina, and a stronger La Nina at that. But what we see so far is we head into that light green region, anywhere from southeast Texas all the way through eastern Texas, and we head all the way up through the mid-Atlantic, right around the Great Smoky Mountains and up into the northeast. We are expected to see those areas some slightly increased precipitation. And basically, that doesn't confirm or deny you're going to get a lot of precipitation, and it's not going to happen every week. It's basically going to happen all at once or nothing at all. And what I mean by that is when we see a tropical system make landfall on the coastal areas, we see that move inland, and then the storm track will likely take it up northeast, bringing a lot of those bigger precipitation patterns to those areas in the light green. So that's basically what we mean. So it'll happen in very specific time frames if we have a system move on there. It's not going to be spread out where we're going to see precipitation patterns and systems move in. It's basically going to be kind of one or two storms that bring a lot of precipitation at once and kind of up that rainfall total for your season. Now, what we see for the next region is that dark green region. That's where we are expecting a lot of that increased above average precipitation. Those are going to be from your systems, again, that move and make landfall, only this is closer to those coastal areas because we see before those systems kind of die out, we will see a lot of rainfall accumulate in these areas with those systems. Now, this doesn't mean that everywhere in this region is going to see a tropical system, but what that does mean is you have the chance to see above average conditions this season, and that's why we placed you in that region there on the map. Now, moving on to our next map here, we're moving on to our temperature anomaly forecast map. And much like the precipitation anomaly forecast map, this tells us whether we'll have above average or below average conditions, only this time it's for temperatures. Now, if you've been to the channel before, you'll notice that a color is missing, and that's the blue colors. And no, that's not a glitch or a graphical error. We aren't expecting any below average conditions this fall season as of yet. So as of our first preliminary fall forecast, we're expecting either average or above average conditions. So it's going to be a pretty warmer fall. And this is why we see elevated conditions that jet stream throughout much of the United States, except for the central portions of the United States. We may see a little bit of troughing, but that's not enough to bring consistent below average temperatures as of what we're seeing yet. So basically, we're going to see a lot of these areas either slightly above average or above average or normal conditions. Now, starting off in that light orange region there, we see anywhere throughout the entire western United States and over into portions of the mid-Atlantic and northeastern United States, we see the potential for some slightly increased temperatures. Basically, what that means is you're expected to see some slightly increased temperature conditions. So maybe 1 to 2 degrees above average, nothing too crazy, nothing too extreme there, but we will likely feel some of that heat build up. It's not like you're going to walk outside and say, this is a massive heat wave, this is terrible, one of the warmest falls I've ever seen. We're not expecting anything like that, otherwise it'd be pretty extreme. This is basically stating that you're going to feel a little bit of a peak in the temperature, but nothing too out of the ordinary there in this light orange region. Now, moving on to our orange area over there in the west, we are expecting above average temperature conditions. So this is where you're going to start to feel that heat. And you may be wondering, well, isn't it always hot out here in the west, especially in the fall? And that is true, but we are expected to experience some increased heat on top of that. So this is where you have to start to pay attention. This is where some of those temperatures can become pretty dangerous. If you have any heat advisories or anything like that, you have to pay attention to those warnings issued by the National Weather Service, because those are going to be life-saving if those temperatures peak up into very high conditions. Now, again, you never have to be worried. This isn't to strike fear into you. This is to help you be more aware of the weather conditions. So if there's a heat advisory in place, make sure you're taking those precautions, drink plenty of water, and head indoors, take short breaks in between those outdoor periods that you go outside and do outdoor activities. But basically in this area, this is where you will feel that heat. And I know every season you already feel that heat, but this is going to be an increase on top of that. Now we see over here a pretty out of the ordinary condition over here up for the northeastern United States. That is right, we are expecting a continued period of those above average temperatures for much of the Northeast. And this is basically due to the elevated jet stream. Again, we're not really expecting any break from that heat. Now, it's not like you're going to be in the 100s or 90s, but you will likely be in a lot of those 80s, mid to upper 80s, and even peaking into some of those lower 90s. That's more earlier in the fall, and then as we head into later fall, maybe around late October, early November, we'll start to see that cool down and progressing towards winter. But right now, we are expected to see some of those warmer conditions and above average temperature conditions this fall, so keep that in mind as we head into the fall season. Now, moving on to our final forecast map, this is usually everyone's favorite because it's colorful and everybody has their own individual region that they're part of, but basically, this is our overall forecast map for the fall forecast that we're going over today. So this will basically give you a kind of pinpoint of what your weather should be like this fall, giving you kind of an overall viewpoint of what will happen. So we're going to start up there for the west, and for those western portions, we see extra hot and extra dry. And the reason I named that region there is because if I said dry and hot, usually that's pretty typical for those areas. A lot of the western United States, maybe not so much up towards Seattle and Washington up there, but we do see down towards California a lot of dry and hot conditions. So people probably be like, hey, what's going on? This is usually dry and hot. Are you kind of gimmicking us here? And that's not the case, but we are expecting even drier and hotter conditions on top of what you already expect in your fall, kind of continuing on into the fall season. Now, moving on east to that orange region, we see hot and dry. And again, this is pretty typical for these areas, but this is still going to be a continuation on top of what we already expect. So we already expect hot and dry conditions for this time of year for Arizona, California, Nevada. That's all typical, but we are expecting hotter and drier conditions. So this is kind of the overall consensus. You're not really going to catch a break from that heat just yet. It's going to be pretty nasty down there. Again, not to make it sound terrible, but it's going to be pretty hot and overall really dry this season. Now, as we head north to the mountains, we do see decreased snowfall. So we see decreased snowfall expected. Normally, in a fall season, we expect snowfall to head down into the Rocky Mountains and a lot of those northern areas. We start to see those seasons open up for a lot of those upper elevations. We start to see that snowfall start to build up. But this year, I do believe we're going to have a slightly delayed snowfall accumulation for those higher elevations due to the lack of precipitation and overall warmer conditions that we are expecting, even for those higher elevations. Now, moving on just below that, we do see monsoon early. And the reason this is named monsoon early is because we are expecting those monsoon conditions for this area to continue early on into the fall season. Now, coming around the mid to the late fall season period, we are expecting that to kind of dry out and slow down. And we are expected to head into more of those drier periods with a lack of monsoon activity. So this is basically going to be an earlier season activity heading to about October. That's when we'll start to see this kind of fade out. And start to lower, so it's not going to be your entire season. Now, moving east, we see that baking region. Now, this is for much of the Great Plains here. We see a lot of these areas are in that baking red region. And as you suspect, this means it's going to be pretty hot. So a lot of hot, humid conditions for these areas, just really overall muggy and warm and generally uncomfortable conditions. So keep that in mind. As we head later into the fall, you should start to see a break from those heat conditions. But as we continue into August and September, I do believe we're still going to have to keep that fall clothing put away and more of that summer outfit criteria out for the remainder of the summer and into early fall. Now, heading up north to the active storm track region, we do see a lot of these areas kind of in that green area, and I do believe that this is going to be a pretty active storm track. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get rain every day, but I do believe that out of everywhere, this is where we'll start to see that dip in the jet stream and a lot of those storm systems being able to kind of escape the northern United States for this area. So again, nothing too crazy up there. It's not like you're going to be every day experiencing rainfall and storms, but I do believe that this is where we're going to see the majority of our stormy conditions this fall. Now, just south of there, we do see severe weather. This is a very small region, but I do expect this is going to be the accumulation of our severe weather for the fall season. Now, like I say in every forecast, this doesn't mean this is going to indicate every day you're going to have storms, tornadoes. That's not what we're saying. But the majority of the United States severe weather that is expected this fall, I do believe is going to be within that region. It can still occur outside of there, but I do believe the majority is going to happen within that red severe weather region. Now, down there to the south, we do see hot and humid. And again, all of you are probably going to be like, if you're from this region, you're going to probably be like, hey, it's always hot and humid. It's the South, okay? We're used to this. But keep that in mind. It's still really hot this time of year. We're headed down there. I do expect you're going to continue those hot and humid conditions. So pretty typical for this time of year. But do keep in mind, it's going to be pretty hot down there and a lot of humid conditions from the Gulf of Mexico. And in our final region, we see watch the tropics. Now, usually this is in every fall forecast of mine just because this is that time of year we start to see the tropics build up. But we do see it a bit further south than usual. We usually carry that up into much of the Northeast. But this year, I'm keeping it a bit further south just because I think the majority of the tropics, at least the extreme extent of the tropics, is going to be down there for the Gulf of Mexico and the southeastern United States. We will still see the potential for tropical systems to move up into the Northeast, but by the time they get there, I don't believe they'll be as extreme as if they were down there to the south. We might not even see them move up to tropical storm status, depending on if they're moving inland, or if they do stay off the coast, we might see some of those tropical systems head up that way, but I don't believe there'll be anything too extreme for your guys up that way. All right, I want to thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. If you did enjoy this video, I would ask you consider subscribing for more U.S. forecasts free of charge. And I would also ask you follow the Weather at a Glance official Facebook page for more inside information and complimentary personal forecasts when you message me on my Facebook page. I would also ask that you like the video and share, as that really helps get this into the algorithm and helps to get my videos to more people. Now, a big thanks to our channel members, Chris, Betty. Thank you so much for keeping the channel going and helping support what we do. And with that, I will see you in the next video.